What's going on, everybody? It's Frito here for your Overwatch. Today, we're going to go over a few maps where a major mistake happens all over the place in Ranked that causes you to get full held all the time. Our first example here has been sent in from a viewer to youroverwatchplays@gmail.com. Thanks to Pyro Rage for sending this one in. Great example. I see this happen all the time, and not just at the low ranks either. Don't feel bad. There's a mass misconception in the Ranked community that assumes you have to ride the cart. Now, to be clear, I know in quick play, it can be hard to get anybody to push the payload ever, but the reality is somewhere in between. You see, the major mistake that Pyro Rage and his team makes going into the choke here at Dorado is assuming that they have to ride the cart and always push it. Because they're on attack, and the path of the payload says we're supposed to go this way, so we should follow the payload no matter what, even if they're spamming into the choke with Junkrat. It's payload pushing tunnel vision. It's a bit of a Ranked disease. You might have to consult your doctor to see if you've got it, but fear not, today we'll try to provide the cure. Let's take a look at a few examples of how pros play this map. And then don't tell me you can't do things pros do, because we're literally just talking about standing in a different place. Everybody can do that. Here the London Spitfire are getting the cart as far as the enemy will let them, and this process in the poke phase, while both teams are kind of shooting at each other and the enemy decides not to contest, this is free cart. Always take free cart when the enemy is going to give it to you, but in today's video we're focusing on those moments when you decidedly don't push the payload. And that you can see already as London Spitfire sees the cart starting to get into that choke. They don't even mess with that choke. Instead, the entire team goes top left, then they can start utilizing the angles of the high ground, start looking for halt hook combinations from the far left side, and now the defense is put at a bit of a disadvantage, sort of a fair fight at this point, but now London is able to find angles and be able to deal meaningful damage while controlling space. If we compare this to Pyro Rage submitted clip, the difference is night and day, because the enemy is allowed to exploit the bridge high ground and just poke out whenever they want, be it for a DPS to get a frag, or even a rip tire coming around uncontested to get a kill. Not having the high ground at all, and especially walking into Junkrat spam, is going to be a surefire way to get your push thinned out for no reason. Now, there's other approaches that pros have devised how to attack Dorado A, and you may have guessed it, it has to do with more not pushing the payload. Here, Agilities goes on a flank on the far right side, and notice how patient he's being right here. He knows the enemy's there. He doesn't want to just jump out and die. It's his presence that is such a big threat. Biding his time, waiting to land the scatter arrow. Modern day Hanzo would use a storm arrow, but the purpose is the same. Creating a crossfire and playing these power positions of the map is key. And I think the big difference between the two philosophies of how a platinum ranked team and how a pro team approaches a map is that it's a shooter game first, right? So like you have to play the map, not the cart. As soon as the opponent can stall the cart indefinitely, you all of a sudden now don't have a payload. I think that's a good way to think about it. If you are playing a pure deathmatch game where your only goal was to kill the enemy, you wouldn't funnel yourself in the low ground walking into spam through a choke. There's just no reason to do that. Of course, you would go on weird flanks, you would use different parts of the map, you would play freely to do whatever it took for you to just kill the enemy. Well, when you're attacking on a payload map and the cart can't move anymore, that's the same exact thought process you need to have. You have to switch your mind over into what do I have to do to get kills, and then start enabling to do that. And of course, every hero has a different approach to this. Maybe a DPS can go on a flank, or the tanks can take a better angle, but the thought process remains the same. I think another thing that a lot of players don't realize is how the concept of angles works in an FPS game. If you funnel your entire team down the low ground on this road, the enemy has the entire map to utilize, including the high ground right above you, by the way, which is a death sentence. But even if they don't end up flanking, which would be really strong from the defense, their entire team can easily focus fire down into a hole. I love the phrase fish in a barrel, and I probably overuse it, but sending your team down this route is definitely setting yourself up to get shot in that way. Whereas pro teams who have devised leaving the cart, abandoning it entirely, maybe keep one person on it just so it doesn't start rolling back, but most of their resources start going up top left, because once you control top left and the enemy doesn't have it, you are more freely to use the rest of the high ground, and more importantly, the bridge, this little alleyway on the side here, and you have options to you. You can still keep pressuring the cart, but most of your attention should be looking to frag the enemy by taking better angles struggles for your team. So now that we've set up the principles of how this works, let's take a look at a couple more payload maps where this type of thing happens very frequently. How many times have you been playing Route 66 and the cart gets stopped on this corner because the entire team stays there, hoping you can just budge it, but everyone just keeps getting fragged time and time again, just trying to brute force the cart through bad terrain? Well, here with my diva play, look how I turn around this fight that we're kind of not winning. I do so by creating space in the backfield, forcing the enemy to peel and reposition, pulling attention away from the cart. This is what mobility and dive does as a core concept. Flanking forces the enemy's attention and resources to get pulled away from these focal points and allows for my other teammates to more easily and freely push the cart. Remember, you really only need one person to push the cart just about the entire game. This like keeping 3 people on cart thing is a big misconception that a lot of people assumed was really good when the game first came out, and maybe in different metas it might be, but especially in the state of Overwatch where it is now, controlling the map is way more important than pushing cart, especially of course when the enemy can easily stop the cart anyway, forcing you to have to go get the map. Now in another clip, I'm going to use Wrecking Ball to do a very similar playstyle to further drive home the importance of what positional advantage does. Look at how I go in against the enemy team and they're forced to reposition. Because the enemy all want to play in a ball, and they kind of have to, Rein Zarya, despite it being a very bad comp on defense, but it's neither here nor there, just by mere disruption alone and forcing them to peel on me or knocking them back and back and back, we're just getting the cart for free and my DPS are uncontested the entire way. This is basically a net positive for me because even if the enemy DPS goes and frags my backline while I'm not peeling, I probably would then be more successful on my own backline harassment and maybe even securing more kills rather than mere disruption, but you get the idea. I'll develop this more in future Wrecking Ball videos. I've been playing him a ton recently. I think he's one of the better characters to think about when these tough defenses are giving you trouble because he's such a tanky, guaranteed flanking presence. But hey, what if you're sitting there saying, but Frito, I don't want to do any of this elaborate flanking tactics. What if my team wants to ride the payload? Well, I think a lot of us know the answer to this. We just don't always apply it. The success of the pirate ship on Junkertown should be the go-to answer for that. Orisa riding the cart, whether she has a Bastion companion or not, is very good for setting up a stronghold as you're coming down riding the cart for a few reasons. Orisa naturally wins shield break wars if you play her right, because the enemy Rein eventually is going to start to fully lose his shield and will have to fully put it down to regen it, whereas Orisa gets a burst of shielding every 8 seconds. Because of this, the Rein has to come engage you in order to stop the cart, and if you just parry back each time and successfully survive as the enemy Rein comes and forces you out, you're going to find yourself on top because they're going to expend their cooldowns to close the distance on you, all of a sudden making you kind of the defensive team, whereas normally you were afraid of the defenders staying out of arm's reach, spamming down on you. But of course, note this does require things like Bastion, Reaper, even Junkrat Hanzo, characters that have really good tank bust, big damage that's going to abuse any cart stallers who try to come down and contest the objective. Going back to our very first example, back on Dorado, I think the reason why a lot of players get fooled into thinking that this is a good way to play the game is that you can get it to work because characters like Rein, Zarya, Ana eventually might get their abilities to land in the right succession to be able to push your way out of a disadvantaged position, because what ends up happening here is our Genji actually does the entire team's job on his shoulders, going off into the high ground, winning a duel by himself, getting a kill there, and then the frags can start cascading after that. The problem is this was done so late into the round, of course, the enemy had quite a bit of ultimates to come retake with, and our attack's going to start getting stalled out and the map being over. We have to adjust to that playstyle a lot earlier, and in fact, not just entrust taking the most important positions of maps from one player to do it by themselves, most of the team actually should be concerning themselves with top left, which as you see, the enemy starts to try to set up to do exactly that. I think they get a little bit trollish with this Symmetra pick that they're trying to set up a teleporter into the backlines, but you see how they do not have their tanks on the cart at all, and in fact, the cart's moving back a little bit, which is something you definitely do want to keep in mind. Sometimes you do need to send at least one person over there to touch it so it doesn't keep rolling back, but because they're able to create chaos in the courtyard, their whole team gets to land their abilities and actually play the game. If they all try to ride the cart, nobody can have angles, no one really can land abilities, the Widow doesn't have sight lines, and frags can't really happen. Now, our hero playing defense here is fragging back a bit and stabilizing, but the bleeding has already started because the enemy is going to have a respawn advantage, which you're supposed to be able to use on attack. Despite a decent effort on the defense here, really, you can't play Dorado A this poorly and expect an enemy team not to cap on you. Guys, that's gonna be everything for today's video. I hope it helped explain the situations where you definitely do not want to be pushing the payload so that you can apply this in your own games. Everybody can do this at every single rank. When the payload is in a bad spot, there is no valor in jumping on it to die endlessly. As the attacking team, you have a lot of time. Set up attacks into the enemy. Don't just ride the cart when the enemy is stopping you. If you enjoyed the video and you found it useful, please be sure to leave it a like. It really does help us out, lets us know that you're enjoying the content. And if you haven't already, please subscribe because we upload each and every day. So you're gonna want to hit the bell icon so that you get notified when our videos go live. Link to the description is our Twitter, where we tweet out news, updates, and take memes. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.